All right, moving on here. David Holy says, how would you tackle the problem with the mostly left-leaning teachers' unions? Would you try to eliminate them altogether, or would it be more feasible to just change their purpose from job retention and political influence to primarily focusing on education for the betterment of the child? I'm glad I get a question about unions. I want to be clear about unions. People, free citizens, have the right to bargain collectively. Any questions? This is a free country, and one of the freedoms that you have in this country is the freedom to associate with other people in your occupation to bargain collectively. I have no problem with this at all. None. I don't generally like the output of unions, but I would never ban them. I would never outlaw them. Public sector unions are a different story, because public sector unions, there is no competition, there's no way around them, and both management and labor are on the same side of the table. That's different. But I have no problem with unions whatsoever. And as I often say about unions, when I say I have no problem with them, I have no problem with the existence of them. I don't like, generally speaking, I think they're bad. But I would never take away a person's right to unionize. I don't believe in taking away people's freedom. And one of the freedoms that people have is the freedom to collectively bargain and to get together, and it makes perfect sense to me, in the same way that you should have the freedom to collectively start a corporation, right? No problem there. However, what you get into is with unions of any kind, when you start finding out that when the union no longer has the power to take the dues out of your paycheck, and you have to write a check for union dues, union membership drops by 70%. It's astonishing. It's astonishing. When the coercion that the unions use is removed, and people are left with a choice. Do I join the union, yes or no? Is it a right-to-work state, yes or no? It should be a right-to-work country, obviously. Then unions don't do so well. And the reason they don't do so well is because the conditions that once made unions powerful don't exist anymore. And so, look, I would say the answer to this, David, is actually very simple, and we always go back to core principles, right? I do. Whenever I face a question, I didn't read these before we got started. Whenever I face a question, I kind of go back to, what are my core principles? What do I believe works, and why? So my core value is freedom, human freedom. And so where does that take me on the union issue? Doesn't tell me I should ban unions or make them illegal, but it does tell me that if people are free to compete, then people will eventually put unions out of business, because they'll provide better services at a lower cost. That's it. The reason we have school unions, this is what you were talking about here, is the teachers' unions, so I'm going from the general to the specific here. Of course they're left-leaning unions. What they're designed to do is to treat students as little boxes, little units. A student is a unit, and you have to graduate a certain number of units per year. A certain number of boxes have to come out of the back end of the factory and get loaded onto a truck. And if all that matters is a graduation rate, then it doesn't matter if the thing in the box is well made or badly made. It doesn't matter if the thing in the box is broken. It doesn't matter if the thing in the box is missing parts. And as a matter of fact, it doesn't even matter if there's anything in the box at all. All that matters is that the box gets out of the ramp and gets loaded onto the truck. So when you're judging success by graduation rates, you're going to get crappy students, because it's easier to graduate a bad student than it is to graduate a good student. That's pretty straightforward. And so the answer to this question, David, comes to the answer of all other questions that I deal with. And this is the nice thing about having a consistent philosophy, is it holds up. And it's the nice thing about having this philosophy, because I don't have to lie to you or myself. I don't have to say I'm in favor of high taxes and then go tell my accountant to pay as few taxes as possible. I get to tell the truth. So I would say, hey, great, you got a public school with public sector unions, fantastic. We are going to make sure that you do not legally lock out either private schooling or homeschooling or anything like that. And furthermore, if you choose not to put your children into this public school, you should have a right to get the money back that you're paying in education, so that you can put it someplace else in the form of a voucher or something like that. Unions are mortified, terrified, horrified of this idea and fight it tooth and nail. And the reason they fight competition tooth and nail is because they understand the power of competition. I was talking with a friend of mine not long ago, and we were heading to Vegas, and she'd spent some time in the communist bloc in Hungary. And a five-star hotel in Budapest, they didn't have butter 4 days out of the year. I'm sorry, 4 days out of the week. We just didn't have butter. We couldn't deliver it. You go to Las Vegas, pretty much everything you want is there, and very high quality and at a relatively low price. It's the difference between competition and non-competition. In a state-run economy, they can't put butter on the table of a 5-star hotel that is mostly visited by overseas celebrities with lots of cash. They can't even put butter on the table 5 days out of the week. Here in America, if you work hard and you have a job, you can live like a king or an emperor, or way beyond an emperor or a pasha. A standard room in a hotel like the Bellagio in Vegas, no one prior to the 20th century, no one prior to the 1940s has ever lived like that. And any working man can do that in America. How dare you say? What do you mean, how dare I say? It's obviously true. If it's your priority, if you want to go to Vegas, you can probably save enough money to go once a year. You can certainly go once every couple years and live like a king. And so, it all comes down to competition. So I just open it to competition, David, and I can't get off the education subject without saying something I just need to be hammering again and again and again and again and again and again and again. Homeschooling, I think, is terrific, but homeschooling is a great principle, but it's an incredible burden, and it shouldn't have to be the burden. In other words, it shouldn't have to be you educating your children. It should be your neighborhood educating your neighborhood's children. And when I say your neighborhood, I mean the people who think like you in your neighborhood. And the thing I keep coming back to with homeschooling in this country is the single greatest resource in this country is retired people. How many retired people are there within a 2-mile radius of your house, or a 1-mile radius? How many chemical engineers are there to teach chemistry? How many accountants are there, retired accountants, to teach accounting and economics? And you wouldn't have to pay them much. Most of them, I bet you wouldn't even have to pay at all. And so instead of, I actually had this thought, I was talking about this up in Mountain View just a couple days ago. Why is it that when we're talking about educating our children, which is supposedly one of the most important, probably the most important single thing we do, why is it that we turn out a 24-year-old or a 23-year-old individual who has a degree in education, and then because they have a degree in education, we expect that they should be able to educate people in chemistry, physics, biology, math, English, Spanish, wood shop, metal shop, geography, all of it. Doesn't it make more sense to have people who are chemists be able to pick up a few credits in education rather than having a person who's an education major studying a little bit of chemistry so they can muddle their way through teaching chemistry? Wouldn't it make more sense to take a chemist and say, and if you want to pick up another 5 credits, 10, 15 credits, here's how you teach chemistry. We don't have to teach you chemistry because you're a chemist, but if you want to know how to teach chemistry, here's how you do it. Wouldn't that be better? And shouldn't the ability to teach kids just be the ability to pass the test? Shouldn't you be able to say, here's how I pass the test, here's how I explain things? Yeah, that's off you go, great. I'm not a certified flight instructor, and I've wanted to be. I could do it rather easily. The one thing I don't want to do about being a CFI is to be constantly on top of the regulations. That's the main reason I don't do it. The number of rules are changing so fast that I just don't want to go to the trouble of staying on top of them. But that doesn't mean that I'm not a great flight instructor. I'm a great flight instructor, and I'm a great ground instructor. I make aviation and aerodynamics understandable to anybody, and I make it fun. I'm a college dropout. I could never get a degree. I could never teach fundamental aeronautics or aerodynamics in a high school, or they just wouldn't let me in the building. But I do a better job than some 24-year-old who has a degree in education would. I can assure you of that. So, look, it's like everything else. Get people out of the system. Parallel structures, small structures, local structures. But don't forget the retired people. They're that giant asset of expertise and passion and real knowledge, practical knowledge. So there you go.